Morning, people. I've just been on Talk TV discussing Brexit. Yes, I know. Maybe I hate myself. Maybe I'm a sadomasochist, but I feel like it's important to keep exposing the narratives that they're using to poison our politics. I feel like I'm one of the people whose job it is
to plunge their hands into the filth so that you can keep yours clean.
But that said, you're probably still going to struggle with this one because some of the arguments that this guy makes make you want to tongue kiss a shark. Now, the reason for the debate was the recent YouGov poll that showed that the people of the UK would vote to rejoin the EU by a ratio of 62 to 38. But that's nothing new. We've been an anti-Brexit country since about 2018, so I made sure I started with the most important thing.
And right now, it is probably the most important issue we're facing because we're facing a massive cost of living crisis that half of low-income families are skipping meals to feed their kids.
And the biggest economic lever that anybody can pull to improve the economy significantly would be to rejoin the single market. We can't
stop the war in Ukraine. We can't undo the damage of COVID. But Brexit, that's the one thing under our control. We could fix that and improve people's quality of life.
But then my opponent, Ben Harris-Quinney, brought it back to the central question of, do the recent polls outweigh a vote from 2016?
This has been the most democratic exercise in British history. We had that referendum, it won. We have then had a great many European and national elections since, confirming that result and electing a party to power to deliver Brexit.
It's difficult hearing these same arguments that have been defeated repeatedly, time and time again. Democratic, you yourself, Ben, you said you opposed Boris Johnson's deal in 2019. You didn't want this Brexit, because ultimately, Brexit is about our relationship with the EU, membership versus a different relationship, and you oppose the new relationship.
As for the elections that have happened since the Brexit vote, in 2017, that election, the majority voted for parties that were committed to staying in the single market. In 2019, the majority voted for parties that were offering a second referendum. Using those elections to justify Brexit makes zero sense. You call it a democratic process. It was the most undemocratic process imaginable. Imagine signing a contract that has four words: leave the European Union, and then the other side of that contract adds 1,000 words of extra terms and conditions 3 years later and says that's your will of the people. No, you've already signed. I was right the first time. The Brexit deal is about 1,200 pages.
You complain about 1,000 words in terms of the terms of leaving the European Union. What about the terms of being part of it? I mean, you could cut down forests to fulfill the amount well, they weren't, no, not by the majority of the public.
Are you hearing what this guy is actually arguing? That it's okay that Leave voters didn't know what new treaty relationship would be negotiated to replace our EU membership. Why? Because most of them hadn't read the initial membership treaty that they voted to pull out of. This is the problem with reality for Brexiteers, because the more obvious it becomes to everybody that Brexit was a catastrophic deception, the fewer places they have to hide. The ledge they're standing on is shrinking, and so they're having to come up with more and more insane arguments to try and save face. Because you remember how offended Brexiteers used to get if you even dared to suggest that they didn't know what they were voting for. But now this guy is not only saying they didn't know what they were voting for, but also they didn't know what they were voting against either. And that's his argument for Brexit. Imagine thinking that it helps your case to say, we had no fucking clue what we were doing. And just so we're clear, there have been 2 other times that something like this has happened in the UK. One was the Good Friday Agreement, where they actually sent the Good Friday Agreement to every voter in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland before they had the referendum, so they could see what they were voting for before they voted. The other time was when the UK voted to join the European community to begin with, because the Treaty of Rome had been in place since 1957, and we voted to join it in 1975. Again, we voted for something that already existed. With Brexit, on the other hand, we voted, and then we let Boris Johnson decide what we voted for 3 years later.
I think the question of Brexit, and most people that I was around during the Brexit campaign were putting the question as simply as this: do you want to be governed domestically from the United Kingdom, or do you want to be governed from overseas?
You can't just rewrite the question. The question was, leave the EU or remain in the EU. There was no question of
but Ben's not
market.
disputing
There's no question of sovereignty. There's no question of... You made the most insane argument a couple of minutes ago that people didn't know what remain meant when those treaties have been in existence for about 20, in 2008, so about 8 years.
No, but the finer detail.
You were making the argument that there was a voluminous treaty to leave. What I'm saying is that the volume of the treaties that tied us to the European Union were far greater. Look, all of this stuff is in the public domain. People could have read either. I think you would have to accept that most people have not read every line of EU treaty dating back to 1970.
Ben, We couldn't have read either because the treaty that we've now got with the EU didn't exist in 2016.
The treaties that tied us to the EU were obviously far more voluminous. So your argument doesn't make any sense.
The initial question was very simple. If anybody wanted further detail, the more voluminous interpretations of treaties and laws and diktats, etc., it was there to look for. That's the point that Ben is making, Femi.
Yeah, right there. That's the look of a man who's realised he's going to have to talk to them like children.
Ultimately, I will say this slowly. The question we were asked is fundamentally about our relationship with the EU. On the Remain side, we had the treaties of the EU. That was defined. That was a well-defined relationship that existed precisely for 8 years. The relationship that we now have, the relationship that Brexit ultimately ended up meaning, had not been negotiated in 2016. It literally didn't exist.
It was literally impossible to know what you were voting for. It's not about how much volume there was.
It's about the fact that it didn't exist. Period.
Well,
I could not know. But
no one's claiming it did.
You what now?
No one's claiming it did.
I know somebody who claimed it did.
Look, all of this stuff is in the public domain. People could have read either.
Yeah, that was you, 30 seconds ago, arguing that people could have read the new treaty with the EU before they voted to leave the EU, which is historically insane.
Your argument was that there was nothing about leaving the single market. And the Prime Minister of this country, David Cameron, said that a vote to leave would mean leaving the single currency and leaving the single market.
Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Hannan, the campaign chair of Vote Leave.
Absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market.
When David Cameron said that voting to leave the EU would end up with us leaving the single market, he wasn't saying that leaving the EU is the same thing as leaving the single market. He was warning us that that's what would end up happening because of Brexiteers like him. So do you have any idea how disingenuous it is to say that people voted to leave the EU because they ignored the reassurances that were made by the people that they agreed with and exclusively followed and listened to the warnings of the people that they called Project Fear? But anyway, the host, Ian Collins, tried to catch me out at the end, but he bit off more than he could chew.
Femi, we've only got 20 seconds here. How has your life been negatively affected, Femi, by us leaving the EU? Short answer if you could, sir.
I live in an economy where food is 6% more expensive, where half of businesses are unable to sell, find it harder to sell to the EU, according to the British Chamber of Commerce, where the NHS has been damaged, and our healthcare has been damaged by that, according to the Nuffield Trust, according to the British Medical Association, according to the nurses union as well. This has severely damaged every sector of the economy, where we now have a smaller job market. We used to be able to work in 31 countries across Europe. Now we can only work in one, unless you're rich enough to be able to work in other ones. It has damaged every area of our lives.
Good job you don't live in Germany then, isn't it? My goodness, it's a car crash over there.
And that's all they've got left, pointing to the economic difficulties in countries that, by the way, have lower inflation rates than we do, as if that suddenly makes us creating trade barriers with our 30 closest neighbours suddenly a good thing. I'm Femi. Have a great week.